Hi, greetings to all of you and welcome. Thank you for joining us for another daily devotion today. Our scripture reading comes from Acts chapter 26, verses 12 through 18. In this connection, I journeyed to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priests. At midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, that shone around me and those who journeyed with me. And when we'd all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It's hard for you to kick against the goads." And I said, "Who are you, Lord?" And the Lord said, "I am Jesus, whom you're persecuting, but rise and stand upon your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint to you as a servant and a witness to the things in which you've seen me and to those in which I will appear to you, delivering you from your people and from the Gentiles to whom I'm sending you, to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me." So Paul's standing before King Agrippa, giving the testimony of his conversion on the Damascus Road. It's so important to Paul. He's actually given his testimony twice now while on trial. Once back in chapter 22 before the Jewish crowd in the temple courtyard, and now again before the Roman governor who basically ruled over the Jewish people on behalf of Rome. And the first thing that really jumped out at me was the fact that he says he saw a light from heaven brighter than the sun. Jesus, the S-O-N, is brighter than the S-U-N. We're reminded as Jesus was transfigured before Peter, James, and John, it says his face shone like the sun. We're reminded of back when Moses, when he had the encounter with God on Mount Sinai, the brightness of Christ that Paul saw fits with Christ's self-description as Jesus called himself the light of the world. This also fits with a description in Hebrews as Jesus being the radiance of the Father's glory. And again, Paul says in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 16, that Christ dwells in unapproachable light. Well, why is this important? Well, let's follow it through in its context. Back in verse 18, Paul said that he was sent to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith. Now, no matter how darkened the human heart may be, darkness does not overcome light. You can think about lighting a candle. In the darkest of rooms, it's the candle that bursts forth in the darkness. And Jesus is often described by many people, I've even heard Christians describe him this way, as a gentleman. And this is right, I think, in the sense that Jesus shows up when he's invited, as any gentleman would. But let me ask you this. Was Jesus gentle with Paul? No, he wasn't at all. He knocked him down and blinded him. Why? Because Paul was kicking against the goads. It would have been familiar to the Jews and anyone who made a living in agriculture what that means, but in our culture, it's not really obvious. Kicking against the goads, what does that mean? Well, let me give you a quick explanation. An ox goad was a stick with a pointed piece of iron on its tip, and it was used to prod oxen when they were plowing. And the farmer would kind of prod the animal to steer it in the right direction. And sometimes the animal would rebel by kicking out at the goad. And all this would do is cause the goad to be driven even further into its flesh. So the more the ox rebelled, the more it suffered. Now, Paul's conversion appears to be this sudden event. But Jesus' words to Paul, "It's hard for you to kick against the goads," really points to the fact that Jesus had been working on Saul for a while, prodding and goading at him. As Paul, along with the other Pharisees, witnessed Jesus' ministry, it likely became a stone in their shoe. It gave them something to at least think about. And the more it goaded at the religious leaders, including Paul, the more they resisted God's proddings. And Jesus intruded into the heart of Paul, not in a gentle way at all, but by constantly goading him and eventually knocking him down and blinding him so he could restore his sight in order that Paul might see Jesus clearly. Now, I don't know where you're at in your journey, but perhaps you've been kicking against the goads a little bit. The temptation is to want to kick a little harder, but all that does is cause the goads to go deeper and deeper. And your conscience may be telling you to submit to the will of the Father, but pride could be keeping you from fully surrendering to the Lordship of Christ. Well, it's time to stop kicking against the goads. The prodding is actually a good sign that God's trying to open your eyes so that you might turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, so that you too may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith. Submission is really the only appropriate response to the goading of God. It's kind of ironic because we find strength in surrendering. So don't delay. Will you stop kicking against the goads and submit to the Lordship of Christ today? I hope and pray that's your case. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful day. Look forward to seeing you next time.